Welcome to Catholic Shrine Basilica YouTube channel.
Ely Cathedral, Ely, England, United Kingdom. Introduction. Ely Cathedral, formerly the Cathedral Church of the Holy and Undivided Trinity, is an Anglican cathedral in the city of Ely, Cambridgeshire, England. The cathedral can trace its origin to the abbey founded in Ely in 672 by St. Ethelthryth, also called Etheldreda. The earliest parts of the present building date to 1083, and it was granted cathedral status in 1109. Until the Reformation, the cathedral was dedicated to St. Etheldreda and St. Peter, at which point it was refounded as the Cathedral Church of the Holy and Undivided Trinity of Ely. It is the cathedral of the Diocese of Ely, which covers most of Cambridgeshire and western Norfolk, Essex, and Bedfordshire. It is the seat of the Bishop of Ely and a suffragan bishop, the Bishop of Huntingdon. Architecturally, Ely Cathedral is outstanding both for its scale and stylistic details. Having been built in a monumental Romanesque style, the Galilee porch, Lady Chapel, and choir were rebuilt in an exuberant decorated Gothic. Its most notable feature is the central octagonal tower, with lantern above, which provides a unique internal space and, along with the West Tower, dominates the surrounding landscape. The cathedral is a major tourist destination, receiving around 250,000 visitors per year, and sustains a daily pattern of morning and evening services. Highly regarded by historians and architects from all over the world for its beauty and size, Ely Cathedral is the only UK building to be listed as one of the 7 wonders of the medieval world. Visible for miles around, the cathedral is often referred to as the Ship of the Fens. Ely Cathedral is a magnificent structure with a history dating back over 1,300 years. Located close to the university city of Cambridge, Ely has an association with many who have shaped history, including King Canute, William the Conqueror, Hereward the Wake, Henry III, Edward III, Queen Philippa, and Oliver Cromwell. More recently, the cathedral has become better known as a film location, having been used as a film set for Elizabeth, The Golden Age, The Other Boleyn Girl, and The King's Speech. The cathedral is surrounded by beautiful parkland and meadows which are ideal for walks and picnics. There are many things to see and do on your visit to Ely Cathedral. Climb the world-famous Octagon or go 66m up to the top of the West Tower. Explore the many medieval monastic buildings. Visit the beautiful Lady Chapel, which is the largest attached to any British cathedral, and enjoy afternoon tea in the 11th century Undercroft. Ely Cathedral have a live peregrine webcam that everyone can access and watch the peregrines nest, hatch and fledge throughout March and early spring. With its unique 14th century octagonal lantern tower, Ely Cathedral is counted among the wonders of the medieval world. Much of the cathedral is over 900 years old, and it offers a rich architectural and historical experience, including the sumptuous 13th century choir and beautiful 14th century Lady Chapel, the largest in the UK. History of Ely Cathedral. The cathedral has its origins in AD 672, when St. Etheldreda built an abbey church. The present building dates back to 1083, and it was granted cathedral status in 1109. Until the Reformation, it was the Church of St. Etheldreda and St. Peter, at which point it was refounded as the Cathedral Church of the Holy and Undivided Trinity of Ely, continuing as the principal church of the Diocese of Ely in Cambridgeshire. It is the seat of the Bishop of Ely and a suffragan bishop, the Bishop of Huntingdon. Architecturally, it is outstanding both for its scale and stylistic details. Having been built in a monumental Romanesque style, the Galilee porch, Lady Chapel, and choir were rebuilt in an exuberant decorated Gothic. Its most notable feature is the central octagonal tower, with lantern above, which provides a unique internal space and, along with the West Tower, dominates the surrounding landscape. When Etheldreda, the woman responsible for the monastery that became Ely Cathedral, was born around 636 CE, Christianity was gaining strength in England. Less than a century earlier, Pope Gregory the Great chose a monk named Augustine to travel from Rome to England in an effort to bring Christianity to the pagan Anglo-Saxons. He arrived in Kent perhaps because it was home to Queen Bertha, a Frankish queen who was already a Christian, and was invited to settle in Canterbury. After the conversion of Queen Bertha's husband King Ethelbert, a cathedral was built in Canterbury and Augustine became the first Archbishop of Canterbury. Etheldreda, a daughter of East Anglia's King Anna, grew up in a Christian family. According to the Venerable Bede writing more than a century later, she was married twice but remained chaste. When her second husband, Egfrith, challenged her vow of perpetual virginity, she asked to be released from the marriage and retreated to the Isle of Ely, a piece of land she had been given as a wedding gift for her first marriage. The fens or bogs surrounding the Isle of Ely were drained in the 17th century, and the cathedral and the small city of Ely are now surrounded by rich farmland. Built on the site of a 7th century monastery founded by Saint Etheldreda, England's Ely Cathedral rises up over the surrounding countryside 16 miles northeast of Cambridge. The soaring cathedral and surrounding grounds today consist of buildings constructed in stages starting soon after the Norman conquest of the region in 1066. Partially destroyed during the Protestant Reformation, the monastery itself was dissolved in 1539 by Henry VIII, but many of the monastery's buildings are still used today by visitors, staff, and children attending King's Ely. Highlights of Ely Cathedral itself include a 12th century tower, a 14th century octagonal tower topped by a wooden lantern, 19th century painted ceiling panels telling the story of the ancestry of Jesus, and the stained glass museum inside the cathedral. The most recent of three major renovations and restoration efforts concluded in 2000, but preservation of the historic structures is an ongoing task. Ely Cathedral hosts 3 services every day of the year, including daily choral evensong services featuring a choir composed of both adults and children. The construction of the Ely Cathedral. Historians date the current cathedral to 1093, though the building itself took more than a century to build. Ely Cathedral was designed as a 3-story cruciform, cross-shaped, and we know that the semicircular apse was under construction by the early 12th century. Much of the original stone for the cathedral was quarried near Peterborough and paid for with eels from the surrounding bogs. Carvings on the early Gothic Galilee porch at the entrance of the cathedral date roughly the same period, though the porch itself wasn't finished until 1220. The grounds were expanded during this time too. The oldest buildings surviving today date from the 12th century, though we know there were many buildings on the site before then. The construction of the Ely Cathedral. Historians date the current cathedral to 1093, though the building itself took more than a century to build. Ely Cathedral was designed as a 3-story cruciform, cross-shaped, and we know that the semicircular apse was under construction by the early 12th century. Much of the original stone for the cathedral was quarried near Peterborough and paid for with eels from the surrounding bogs. Carvings on the early Gothic Galilee porch at the entrance of the cathedral date roughly the same period, though the porch itself wasn't finished until 1220. The grounds were expanded during this time too. The oldest buildings surviving today date from the 12th century, though we know there were many buildings on the site before then. Architecture of Ely Cathedral. Architectural styles. Gothic architecture, Romanesque architecture, English Gothic architecture, Norman architecture. Ely Cathedral is one of the most prominent cathedrals in the country and is considered to be a masterpiece of medieval architecture. Its relatively isolated location and the surrounding plain fields make it stand out in the landscape and appear even grander than it would in a built-up setting. Today, it's a popular filming location for movies. See if you recognize the structure from movies such as The Other Bull and Girl, The King's Speech and Elizabeth, The Golden Age. The cathedral site originally served as a Benedictine monastery founded by the Anglo-Saxon Saint Etheldreda in 673. After the nunnery was destroyed by the Danes, The Normans constructed a church here in the late 11th century. Note the Romanesque arches that support the building's massive walls, which were added when the church was elevated to cathedral status in 1109. Enter the cathedral through the Great West Door in the Galilee porch, which is a characteristic typical of the early English style of architecture. Admire the cathedral's lofty nave, which is the fourth longest cathedral nave in England, measuring 248 feet, 75 meters. Other noteworthy architectural features include the Victorian painted ceiling and the simple round Norman arches. Be sure to see the magnificent lantern tower, which was constructed in 1322. Consisting of over 400 tons, 365,000 kilograms, of lead and wood, the tower is a remarkable engineering achievement. Don't miss the 14th century Lady Chapel, a decorated style chapel, which retains its original charm despite suffering damage during the Reformation. Look closely at the empty niches, which once contained exquisite period statues. Save time to see the cathedral's museum, which explores the evolution of stained glass throughout history. With displays of stained glass windows presented in illuminated cases, the museum provides an interesting perspective on how styles of craftsmanship have changed over more than 8 centuries. A visit to the cathedral is particularly enchanting during choral services and evensongs. Sign up for a guided tour to get a rare look inside the cathedral's towers. Like many cathedrals in England, the abbey that became Ely Cathedral was rebuilt and vastly expanded by the Normans using enormously thick walls and sturdy Romanesque archways. Over successive centuries, it has been expanded, restored, and redesigned many times. Several Gothic additions to the original design are among the most well-known parts of the cathedral, while changes made during a Victorian-era renovation are also prominent today. Original and more modern design features include a soaring 537-foot-long Norman nave, the third longest of any medieval cathedral in England, a 215-foot-tall West Tower completed in 1189, an early Gothic Galilee porch, probably completed in 1220, a central Octagon Tower, designed to replace the Norman tower that collapsed in 1322, featuring a wooden lantern, an intricately carved Gothic Lady Chapel, finished in 1349, 12 elaborately painted ceiling panels in the nave completed during the Victorian-era restoration in 1862. Present-day church. The cathedral is built from stone quarried from Barnack in Northamptonshire, bought from Peterborough Abbey, whose lands included the quarries, for 8,000 eels a year, with decorative elements carved from Purbeck marble and local clunch. The plan of the building is cruciform cross-shaped, with an additional transept at the western end. The total length is 164 meters, 537 feet, and the nave at over 75 meters, 246 feet, long remains one of the longest in Britain. The West Tower is 66 meters, 217 feet, high. The unique Octagon Lantern Tower is 23 meters, 75 feet, wide and is 52 meters, 171 feet, high. Internally, from the floor to the central roof boss, the lantern is 43 meters, 141 feet, high. The cathedral is known locally as the Ship of the Fens, because of its prominent position above the surrounding flat landscape. Galilee Porch. The Galilee Porch is now the principal entrance into the cathedral for visitors. Its original liturgical functions are unclear, but its location at the west end meant it may have been used as a chapel for penitents, a place where liturgical processions could gather, or somewhere the monks could hold business meetings with women who were not permitted into the abbey. It also has a structural role in buttressing the West Tower. The walls stretch over 2 stories, but the upper story now has no roof, it having been removed early in the 19th century. Its construction dating is also uncertain. Records suggest it was initiated by Bishop Eustace, 1197 to 1215, and it is a notable example of early English Gothic style. But there are doubts about just how early, especially as Eustace had taken refuge in France in 1208, and had no access to his funds for the next 3 years. George Gilbert Scott argued that details of its decoration, particularly the syncopated arches and the use of Purbeck marble shafts, bear comparison with St. Hugh's Choir, Lincoln Cathedral, and the west porch at St. Albans, which both predate Eustace, whereas the foliage carvings and other details offer a date after 1220, suggesting it could be a project taken up or reworked by Bishop Hugh of Northwold. Lady Chapel. In 1321, under the sacrist Allen of Walsingham, work began on a large freestanding Lady Chapel, linked to the north aisle of the chancel by a covered walkway. The chapel is 100 feet 30 meters long and 46 feet 14 meters wide, and was built in an exuberant decorated Gothic style over the course of the next 30 years. Masons and finances were unexpectedly required for the main church from 1322, which must have slowed the progress of the chapel. The north and south wall each have 5 bays, comprising large traceried windows separated by pillars, each of which has 8 substantial niches and canopies which once held statues. Below the window line, and running round 3 sides of the chapel, is an arcade of richly decorated nodding og's, with Purbeck marble pillars, creating scooped-out seating booths. There are 3 arches per bay plus a grander one for each main pillar, each with a projecting pointed arch covering a subdividing column topped by a statue of a bishop or king. Above each arch is a pair of spandrels containing carved scenes which create a cycle of 93 carved relief sculptures of the life and miracles of the Virgin Mary. The carvings and sculptures would all have been painted. The window glass would all have been brightly colored with major schemes, perhaps of biblical narratives, of which a few small sections have survived. At the Reformation, the edict to remove images from the cathedral was carried out very thoroughly by Bishop Thomas Goodrich. The larger statues have gone. The relief scenes were built into the wall, so each face or statue was individually hacked off, but leaving many finely carved details and numerous puzzles as to what the original scenes showed. After the Reformation, it was redeployed as the parish church, Holy Trinity, for the town, a situation which continued up to 1938. In 2000, a life-size statue of the Virgin Mary by David Wynne was installed above the Lady Chapel altar. The statue was criticized by local people, and the cathedral dean said he had been inundated with letters of complaint. Stained glass. In 1845, Edward Spark, son of the Bishop Bowyer Spark, and himself a canon, spearheaded a major campaign to reglaze the cathedral with colored glass. At that time there was hardly any medieval glass, mostly a few survivals in the Lady Chapel, and not much of post-Reformation date. An 18th century attempt to get James Pearson to produce a scheme of painted glass had produced only one window and some smaller fragments. With the rediscovery of staining techniques, and the renewed enthusiasm for stained glass that swept the country as the 19th century progressed, almost all areas of the cathedral received new glazing. Under Spark's oversight, money was found from donors, groups, bequests, even gifts by the artists themselves, and by Edward Spark himself. A wide variety of designers and manufacturers were deliberately used to help find the right firm to fill the great lancets at the East End. In the event, it was William Wales who undertook this in 1857, having already begun the 4 windows of the octagon, as well as contributions to the southwest transept, south aisle, and north transept. Other windows were by the Durant brothers, William Warrington, Alexander Gibbs, Clayton and Bell, Ward and Nixon, Hardman and Company, and numerous other individuals and firms from England and France. A timber-boarded ceiling was installed in the nave and painted with scenes from the Old and New Testaments, first by Henry Stileman Lestrange and then, after Lestrange's death in 1862, completed by Thomas Gamber Perry, who also repainted the interior of the octagon. A further major program of structural restoration took place between 1986 and 2000 under Deans William Patterson, 1984–90, and Michael Higgins, 1991–2003, directed by successive surveyors to the fabric, initially Peter Miller, and from 1994 Jane Kennedy. Much of this restoration work was carried out by Ratty and Kett. In 2000 a processional way was built, restoring the direct link between the North Choir Aisle and the Lady Chapel. In 1972, the Stained Glass Museum was established to preserve windows from churches across the country that were being closed by redundancy. It opened to the public in 1979 in the North Triforium of Ely Cathedral, and following an appeal, an improved display space was created in the South Triforium, opening in 2000. Besides rescued pieces, the collection includes examples from Britain and abroad that have been donated or purchased through bequests, or are on loan from the Victoria and Albert Museum, the Royal Collection, and Friends of Friendless Churches. Annual Feast Day. Feast Day, October 17th. The annual feast day of the Church of Ely Cathedral, Ely, England, is celebrated on October 17th each year. Mass timing. The weekday pattern is morning prayer at 7:30 a.m., Holy Communion at 8 o'clock a.m., and evensong or evening prayer at 5:30 p.m. The Sunday pattern is Holy Communion at 8:15 a.m., sung Eucharist at 10:30 a.m., and evensong or evening prayer at 4 o'clock p.m. On Wednesdays and Fridays at 12:15 p.m. we also have a short midday prayer service, and on Thursdays at 12:10 p.m. a service of Holy Communion. Contact info: Ely Cathedral, The College, Ely Camp, CB7 4DL, United Kingdom. Accommodations, connectivities, airway. The nearest airport to the Church of Ely Cathedral, Ely, England is Cambridge City Airport, Newmarket Road, Cambridge, CB5 8RX, United Kingdom, which is just 29 minutes 16.4 miles, via A10 away from the Basilica. Railway. The nearest railway to the Church of Ely Cathedral, Ely, England, Soham, Ely CB7 5HT, United Kingdom, which is just 13 minutes 5.8 miles, via A142 away from the Basilica.
If you wish to know more about Catholic shrine basilicas, Marian shrines and Marian apparitions, subscribe to our Catholic Shrine Basilica YouTube channel. Like and share with your loved ones. For more churches, website www.catholicshrinebasilica.com.